What's up, noobs? I end most of my videos with WOMs, what's on my bookshelf. They're recommendations for books that in some way influence my thinking in each video. So to end the year, I'm compiling the entire WOM list for you guys, because my reading list has largely shaped my thinking as a real estate developer. So here's the 20 books I recommended throughout 2020. I divided them into categories, so feel free to hop around using the timestamps in the description. I also put links to the original videos where I recommended the books up here. On the topic of real estate, the following 3 books cover a pretty wide spectrum. Evicted by Matthew Desmond follows 8 Milwaukee families' eviction stories and shows how systemic and personal issues can lead to these situations. As real estate developers, we have a responsibility to put people first. It may seem glamorous to develop luxury properties, but realize that your renters are people, not just cash flow. That being said, developing luxury properties is pretty glamorous. Most developers will never do things on the scale of the Las Vegas Strip, but you can get some insight into how Kirk Kerkorian, Steve Wynn, and Gary Loveman put together their deals in Winner Takes All by Christina Binkley. And to wrap up the real estate category, Jane Jacobs' The Life and Death of American Cities stresses the importance of context and communities. Whether you're building affordable housing or a casino, cities develop very organically, and you have to be mindful of your project's impact on a community's growth. The next category covers all the numbers, economics, finance, and statistics, and I recommended 6 books this year. First up is the first book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Even though he's a scam artist now, this book has some great fundamentals for anyone looking to get into real estate. Actually, everything is just based off of 2 principles. Number 1, save money by avoiding buying depreciable assets or liabilities. And number 2, use that money to buy appreciable assets. Next up are a couple of books to build up your mental defenses against bad statistical practices, which are commonplace in the real estate industry. How to Lie with Statistics by Darrell Huff was written in the 1950s, but all his advice to spot the flaws in arguments backed by statistics still rings true today. And digging further into the topic, The Black Swan by Nicholas Nassim Taleb will help you understand why our predictions using historical data can be so far off, especially if you're using the normal curve. And to round out your mental defenses, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman can help you identify your own cognitive biases. Technically, this is a psychology book, but Kahneman's work won a Nobel Prize in economics. You'll learn how to avoid your own mental traps when building out predictive models. Zooming out to a macro view, I recommended another Nobel Prize winner in economics, Joseph Stiglitz. The Price of Inequality will keep your greedy developer motives in check. But isn't greed good? The antithesis of this book is The Upside of Inequality by Edward Conard. No matter which way you lean, it's good to understand both sides of the arguments. Alright, next category is technology and startups. Not many real estate developers approach projects with a startup mentality, but there's a lot to learn from how the startup scene does things, so I recommended 8 books in this category. First up is Range by David Epstein, which is about how a lot of people got to the top of their respective fields not by specializing, but by having a diverse array of experiences first. They're able to see connections across fields and come up with solutions that specialists have trouble seeing. And you can read all about one of the early geniuses with incredible range in Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. He is the OG inventor and almost definitely would have been a startup founder and billionaire in modern times. If you read enough stories about successful startup founders, you'll start to see patterns in their mindset. But you can take a shortcut by reading Safi Bakal's Loonshots. He outlines a framework on how to nurture innovation with a number of real-world examples. One of real estate's best real-world examples of a loonshot is the Airbnb story by Lee Gallagher. It covers the history of the founders and the growth of Airbnb through 2016, so it doesn't include recent history, but it gives a ton of insight on how they developed and maintained a design-oriented culture as they grew. Diving into the more technical side of creating and growing startups, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Andreessen Horowitz co-founder Ben Horowitz and Secrets of Sand Hill Road by Andreessen Horowitz partner Scott Cooper give intimate details of the inner workings of venture capital in Silicon Valley, and some of the stresses founders deal with. And the last 2 books in this category cover the future of technology and where we're headed. Kevin Kelly's The Inevitable covers 12 forces that are evolving technologies and human behaviors in tandem over the next few decades. And looking even further into the future of humanity by Michio Kaku shows how the 4th technological wave, which covers AI, biotech, nanotech, and robotics, is the beginning of how we will eventually leave Earth and become an interstellar species. And the last category is just for fun. It's important to find a balance in life, and Mo Gaudat's book Solve for Happy outlines a framework on how to find happiness in any situation. Avoid the last chapter though. Don't say I didn't warn you. Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain shares his relationship with food and his journey to become a professional chef and reveals what happens behind the scenes in commercial kitchens. And finally, What If? Serious Answers to Absurd Hypothetical Questions by Randall Munroe. It's a coffee book where each chapter is a detailed scientific response to absurd hypothetical questions. The answers are hilarious, but whether you want to be a startup founder or a real estate developer, crazy out-of-the-box thinking like this is actually really useful. That's all, noobs. Stay curious and see you next year.